As everybody is coming in, we would love to know, where are you from and what age is your favorite student? So where are you from and what age of student are you supporting? Because we are going to be talking about strategies that are going to help every single age today. So if you have an elementary school student, if you have a college student, we are going to be touching on strategies that are going to help simply everyone. Okay, so we have some 11-year-old and a 6-year-old from San Antonio, 16-year-old, 15-year-old, ninth grader in Massachusetts. I taught ninth grade for over 12 years. It's one of my favorite grades in school. Oh, we have like a nice, somebody from Pennsylvania is here. Nice representing Pennsylvania. I'm also from Pennsylvania. Oh, this is wonderful. I mean, I can see we have such a range of ages, which is just what we want because we're going to be talking about things that have to do with every single age. So I want to welcome everyone in to day 2 of our Fall into Focus webinars. Today, we are talking Motivation 101, a blueprint for unlocking your child's motivation. Motivation is one of those things that we know about, but we really want to learn more about. It's one of those things as an educator where I always think we have a very basic definition in our heads of people, but when we can get those educational specific strategies, we can really unlock things in such a powerful and profound way. My name is Rachael Moss. I am an executive function coach and also an instructional support specialist with Educational Connections. And my background is in ELA. I was a literature, AP, honors teacher, everything to do with reading, writing, and really thick works of literature for high school, middle school, and college students. And I am joined today by Jan Rowe. And Jan, I would love for you to introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, I am Jan, and I am also an executive functioning coach with Educational Connections. I have been with Educational Connections for about 12 years now, and I also tutor elementary, middle school. My focus is math. Um, Before coming to Educational Connections, I was a classroom teacher for 13 years, so I saw a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today, also in the classroom.
So I think what you can tell is that no matter your question, no matter the age, no matter the subject, Jan and I have got you covered today. So, one thing that I want to encourage everyone to do, as you have questions about the conversation that Jan and I are going to have, feel free to throw those questions in the chat. Don't worry about waiting until the end. Get your questions in as you think of them. We are going to have Q&A at the end, but we want to make sure that everybody can, share their thoughts as we're talking and discussing motivation. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to define motivation. So what we want to do is we want to define what it is and also in a way what it isn't. Now, a lot of times when we think about motivation, we think about more of a conversational definition, which I often think of as more inspiration. Like we'll think about a motivational quote or we'll think about a motivational speech. And so we have this idea that motivation comes from words we hear coming out of somebody's mouth, and then somehow those words create inspiration in another. But that isn't an educational definition of motivation. Unfortunately, what we say can't really regulate a child's behavior. True motivation, when we talk about it in this educational way, comes from a combination of self-efficacy and self-regulation. Self-efficacy is a belief about one's ability to succeed at a task, and self-regulation is consistent and appropriate application of self-control in key situations. So, Jan, I know that you're working with younger students. When you're working with younger students, What are some things that you see that are like ways that the folks in our webinar could identify like self-efficacy or self-regulation?
So with self-regulation, I see this quite a bit. Students just don't have a system set up so that they know what to do first, second, third to help them accomplish the tasks that they need to accomplish. So they just don't start the assignments. They just don't have a system in place. And so I see that quite a bit, like them not wanting to start the assignment, procrastinating. But then once we have this system in place, then they start believing that they can be successful.
Yeah.
So I believe a lot of the students that I work with, it's hand in hand, getting that consistency down, and knowing what they need to do. And then they start feeling a little bit more successful. They start feeling confident, and then they can start believing that they're going to be able to get this accomplished.
Yeah. So what you're really solidifying for us through your examples is the fact that true motivation is coming from within the person. And it doesn't matter what age you are. This is happening with every single one of us. True motivation is coming from our beliefs and the way that we self-regulate. But we have to be able to help our favorite learners. And we know if we have any students that we care about that are dealing with ADHD with weak executive function skills, my goodness, is it difficult to self regulate? Is it difficult to tap into that self efficacy? So, Jan, in your experience working with students, can you give us some examples of some of the challenges that kids dealing with ADHD or weak executive function skills face when it comes to motivation?
Yes. So I will have quite a few students say, I don't know where to start. It's too hard for me. They start feeling a little bit like they can't get it done. They'll tell me, I'm sorry, I'm zoning out. So I see that quite a bit. And those are the comments that the kids are telling me, that they're feeling whenever they just don't, they're not able to focus, or they're not able to figure out which task they should do first. And so they just push it off and they don't do any of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really sounds like you're describing what I mean, and the kids that I'm working with are in middle school through college. I'm seeing the same thing. I'm seeing task paralysis, what we sometimes call ADHD freeze, where there's everything to do and there's really like they can't figure out like how to get it done, you know? And
Right.
when we're working with kids, and I can even start to see some great questions popping up in our chat, what we're all talking about with motivation it kind of goes hand in hand with another process that we use a lot in our sessions and that we use a lot in education. Now, this is the cycle of change. This actually may be something that you are familiar with because this is used in education, but it's also used in like mental health or psychology disciplines, but we're really looking at it in the way that kids approach their work. So and I'm going to use the example of when we start to work with students. So when I start to work with students on my roster, they are coming in where they may not think that they need support, where they may not see that their motivation challenge is an issue. And so they're coming in like, you know what, I don't need this. They're coming in pre-contemplation. So, and Jan, like the next step is like, contemplation where they're thinking about things someday. For our younger students, because I can see that some of our examples on the screen here are definitely like older students. How
Right.
do you see like contemplation in the cycle of change in our younger students?
The same. They will say the same thing. I don't need this. I know where everything is. I know which folders. So I don't really know what we're going to be doing in the session. So these are the same conversations I'm having.
Mhm.
So whenever I do hear those conversations or I hear the students saying that, the first thing I want to do is let them know I understand how they're feeling. I
Hmm.
understand how this feels because sometimes they start feeling nervous about somebody coming in and taking a look at everything that they're doing, and they're afraid that I'm going to make too many changes in
Yeah.
life. And so that's uncomfortable. So what I do is I just let them know that I understand how they're feeling about it. I understand they have their own system, and I want
Hmm.
to get a relationship going with them. I want them to be
Absolutely.
able to explain things to me. So I just open it up and say, okay, I understand you have your system. Can you share that with me? Let's just go through the system that you have. And then as I'm going through this, as they're explaining their system, we're building that relationship. And then they start feeling a little bit more comfortable sharing where, okay, well, I could use some help over here in this
Hmm.
area. I could use some help over here. Not too much help, but maybe a little bit of help here. Okay. And so then I'm able to share with them some strategies. So it's a slow process sometimes when they come in at this stage, but we do get there. We do
Yeah.
get there as we build that relationship with them. So
Yeah.
that's the first stage. Yes.
Yeah, and what I'm noticing is that as you're talking about this, what you're actually doing is you're giving us examples of kids' beliefs about their work. So when we're trying to tackle motivation, if we are looking at a kid on the cycle of change, these first like areas, if they're pre-contemplation and I mean, I am also kind of hearing that maybe our elementary kids are like, look, lady, I'll do this when I get to college.
Right. I mean, yeah, really, I do. I hear
Yeah.
that. So in elementary, they'll say, I'll do this when I get to middle school. That's what I
Oh,
hear. And then when I hear
okay.
middle school, it's I'll do this when I get to high school. And so,
Yeah.
yes, that's the conversation that that I'm having that picks up when you have them. So,
Yeah.
yes.
And it too, like when I have college kids, they'll say, well, you know what? I'm not like when I get a job,
Yeah.
it'll be different. So it doesn't matter the age. Like when what we're really doing though is we're mining those student beliefs. So the one of the beliefs that we're kind of keying in on here is they are thinking that things could be better in the future, but we want to understand why. We want to understand why things aren't motivating in the here and now. Now, in our sessions, the great examples that Jan gave to you are examples of how this coaching relationship is one that is working a student through this cycle of change so that they can have that lasting maintenance. But there are times where, sometimes a student will have certain beliefs about themselves when it comes to a certain subject or a certain grade. One of the takeaways here is to really understand what the student's beliefs are when they are coming to new opportunities or to what you're observing. Because if you're here to support your favorite student, you are observing a lack of motivation. So, our cycle of change can get us to look at the baseline self efficacy. Okay. So, where we are right now, we need some strategies to support self efficacy. So, self efficacy may be something that you're familiar with, or it may be new. Self efficacy affects everything that a kid chooses, it also affects everything that we choose. And the strategy that helps with self efficacy is focusing on past performance. So, in order to illustrate self efficacy, I always use the example. I have a student on my roster. She is an amazing writer. She can write creative fiction. She writes books, she illustrates them. Had a full on breakdown when it came time to write the research paper and said, well, I can't write. And it's like, my friend, I have seen your fiction. Yes, you can. So, in writing, self efficacy for fiction, incredibly high. Self efficacy for writing nonfiction, down in the dumps. So, Jan, with our younger students, how are you seeing their beliefs about tasks affecting their motivation and performance?
Okay, so I have a student that I just had recently having a science test. He is extremely nervous about a science test coming up. He did extremely well on the first two quizzes. So his teacher has given three quizzes, and then there's the unit test. He did extremely well on the first two quizzes, but the third quiz, Not as well as he did on the first two, but it was really just one topic that he struggled with a little bit. But coming from that quiz, he is extremely nervous about the unit test. So what we've discussed is, okay, let's look and see how did you do on unit one? I mean, the quiz one and the second quiz. You did extremely well. You have mastered all of those topics. Now, the third quiz, there was just that one topic that we want to focus on, and let's do that. Let's focus on that. And then let's go back over those quiz questions. And
Hmm.
so once we did that, and he was able to, oh, okay, now I understand the topic. I know what pieces I was missing. And now he's very confident. He's almost excited about taking the test now. So going back and using those prior quizzes and showing how well he had done, and then applying what he had done for those first two quizzes to review for what he did on his third, that made all the difference for him. And he's feeling a lot more confident about taking that quiz, which is coming up. So, I mean, the
So
test, the test.
yeah, what I noticed in the example that you gave is you're not giving the kid a pep talk. You're not like, come on, bud. We're not in a locker room. This isn't like the sports pick. What you're doing is you're using the most effective strategy for self-efficacy, which is focus on past performance. So like how you were like, okay, focus on the past quizzes. This is what my student that I mentioned, the writer, she was, I found out that one of the fantasy stories that she wrote, she was basing some of it on ancient Rome. And I said, "Oh, that's so interesting. How did you do that? Tell me about that process." And she's like, "Oh, well, I got a book out of the library and I watched a documentary." And so
Right.
I was like, no, so tell me about that. And I got her to talk about that past performance. She willingly did research, learned about a topic, wrote about it. So we were able to
Yeah.
use that to feed her forward. So our best strategy for helping kids with self-efficacy is not to give a pep talk. It is to notice, name, and nourish. And these are the things that you're hearing from both Jan and I, that we are not going out there and I want to say too, like when we're working with kids we care about, we want to rush in and fix things. We want to pep them up, get them out there, tell them that they're strong. But if self-efficacy is down in the dumps, anything that we say, it's not like we can, pep them up into really feeling better about themselves. So, what are some things that you do to notice, name, and nourish, Jan?
So I'll use a math example.
Hmm.
So with math, I have a lot of kids that I work with that just don't have confidence in math. And so there's some strategies that we use to similar to showing what they have done in the past. So for example, with math, it builds on skills. So
Hmm.
a lot of times with math, it's maybe just one little piece that they're missing. So what we do is we take them back to the previous skill. Look, you did know you solved a one-step equation. You didn't have any trouble with this one-step equation. And so now let's build on that two-step equation, showing them some examples, having them work those examples, feeling confident that, okay, I know what piece I was missing. And now they can start doing them on their own and building, oh, okay, I got that one correct. I got that one correct. I got that one correct. And so as they go back to a previous skill, similar to what we were talking
Hmm.
about in other subjects, looking at previous quizzes, with math, it's looking back at a previous skill that they did prior to adding an additional step to it. And so that's
Absolutely.
how we build on the math side of things. And once we do that, the kids are starting to feel so much more confident. And then I
Hmm.
can't emphasize enough a study guide or practice problems, doing them over and over and over again. Because as they do them, they are feeling more and more and more confident going through those steps. And that takes them into a test feeling so much more confident
Yeah.
by practicing it. And so, yes, I agree. It's not, I'm saying, okay, you're going to do really well. You know what you're doing. It's showing them how well they've done in the previous steps, and the previous skills that they've worked on, and then
Mhm.
how they've built the next step. And then they can apply it, and then they do their practice, and then they're, oh, okay, I got this. I've got this. So, yes, it's building that, and then taking that confidence into the test really makes a huge
Yeah.
difference for them.
Yeah. I was just working with a student just this morning who's applying to different college programs and kind of has lower self-efficacy about their ability to even get accepted. And so this was my notice, name, and nourish today. The student shared a letter of recommendation that they got from, somebody that's recommending them from the program. And this letter of recommendation is full of these like all of the academic strengths, the way that this person is viewed as a community leader. And I said, reflect on, like I shared what I was noticing in that letter of recommendation. Look at how this person values you. Look at how you're viewed in the community. This is coming from your work and your abilities. So it was like, honestly, we say avoid giving pep talks, but naming, noticing, and nourishing those that we care about, those learners we care about, is such a great way to pep them up because it's coming from inside. And
Right,
you may be like listening to Jan and I talk and say, okay, great ideas. Don't even know how to start. We have
right.
got you covered. So we've got some, talking points. So a lot of times, a student will come to us and like Jan was just talking about tests. This is one of the biggest things that we encounter with students. Okay, so um, this is a situation where a kid has taken a test and maybe comes to us and says, oh, I think I did good, you know, and kind of our knee jerk is, what do you think you could have studied harder? I mean, like, I can help you study harder. That's more the pep talk. But we might want to say something like, okay, I can understand. Maybe you're worried about this. How about if we work on some strategies on the next quiz that really worked for you on those past quizzes? Jen, what other sorts of like talking points do you have when you're helping a student with self-efficacy to notice the potential and the strengths that they have?
So this is a great question because I work with quite a few students that will say, "Well, I studied like this for my other class, and and it worked really well, and so I want to keep doing that." But it didn't work for them when they took the test in another subject. So I have a student, and she does really well using Quizlet, which I love Quizlet, I'll have to say.
Hmm.
She uses Quizlet for all of her classes. She's doing extremely well. But there's one class, her science class, it's not working for her. And so she's got a lower grade. She's not happy about it. And she's like, I can't keep doing this because it's not working. So I said, well, you know what? Let's think back when you did feel successful in a
Hmm.
science class. And what did you do? She said, well, I did flashcards. I did. I actually used flashcards. I didn't use online. I said, well, how about let's try that again? Let's go back to the flashcards. So she set up her flashcards and so and she said that I really like this because now I can, hold the flashcard, put it into my
Hmm.
piles. I know this. I need to work on this. This I don't know. And so she felt like she was able to focus her time on those flashcards a little bit more than she would on Quizlet for that
Yeah.
particular subject. And so she did that and she did really well. So going through and discussing with them what, did work for them in the past, and maybe not a one, one size fits all for all their classes. Maybe sometimes it works, but then if it doesn't, let's go back to some of the other strategies. And so that's what having that conversation and relationship with the students and trying
Absolutely.
to talk about past experiences, what worked, what did you like doing too, is another question.
Yeah,
It's like, what do you like? Do you like using flashcards? Do you like using Kahoot? What do you like? What do you enjoy? And this particular student I'm talking about, she liked to do her studying right before she went to sleep. And so it made it much easier for her to do the flashcards because, not having the laptop, not having that. So, having that relationship and finding out when they're doing it, what they enjoy doing. So that has really helped quite a bit, working with students and coming up with strategies that can help.
absolutely. I love that. I love how you're really tapping into that student's like past performance because that is a strong predictor of future progress.
Yeah.
So we want to do the same thing for self-regulation. We talked about the fact that self-regulation is is something that helps with motivation. The great thing about self-regulation is that this one can be taught. So we can teach self-regulation skills to students, and we have to make sure that we are consistent and appropriate in application of self-regulation in key situations because that's what self-regulation is. It's being consistent and appropriate in the way that we control things. So we can coach kids on this. We can provide guided routines. We can allow kids gradual autonomy over their tasks. So, Jan, would you tell us about some of the way that you coach and teach self-regulation strategies to students in your sessions?
Yes. So when I work with students, they know the first like four steps we're going to do
Yeah.
every single time. I'll even have students immediately tell me, okay, before we do this, I want to tell you about, so the first thing we do is we look at the grades. That's the very
Mhm.
first thing we do. And so we look at that. And so a lot of kids are nervous about it at first. And I said, okay, I know that your grades are changing all the time. So what we want to do to focus on is what's been added to the grade book. Is there something missing? Is there
Yeah.
something upcoming? So let's just take a look at that first, okay? So that you feel comfortable sharing that. The next step is we want to go to Schoology or the teacher's websites. We want to look and see what's going on in each class and see what's upcoming, see what they did during that particular class period. Is there some notes that we need to finish? Is there some
Hmm.
homework that we need to work on? And so we go through each class and then we set up a priority list based on what we just did from the grades and then from the classes. And they prioritize what's number one, two, three, and then they make their list. And then
Absolutely.
what we do is talk about, okay, we're not going to be able to, if we don't get all of this completed, you're going to need to complete some of this out after the session. What could
Right.
get in our way? And how are
Hmm.
we going to plan to get these assignments completed throughout the week or prepare for a test? And so I reinforce that with the students and with the families that I'm working with that this is something that they don't just do it on the session, they do it every single day
Exactly.
without me. So this is so at the very beginning when I start working with students, let's write down the steps. We have a great program which is lesson space. Families can go into lesson space, they can see what the steps are, and the students can do that on their own every
Yeah.
single day. So they have they know what's going to be expected.
Yeah. This is something that this is how you coach and teach kids about these things. And I love the examples that you're giving because it seems like even for our younger students, the same great strategies apply for our older students. Like my kids who are in college, I use lesson space. I get all the syllabi in there. And so now we can see everything in one place and it's like, okay, what is due when? How can we get this done while you also have this club, while you also have this thing going on? create the strategy that's going to help them, and then give them the space where they're managing things a bit on their own. And then in the future, and I know you know this too, Jen, with students that you've been working with for a while, they do start to take over. Some of my sessions, I personally now feel like I'm just the PA, like the personal assistant for the CEO, where I'm like,
Exactly.
let me take some notes for you, and that's what we want to see. We want
Yeah.
to see our students taking on these self-regulation skills. So again, you're listening to some great examples and ideas from Jan and I, but you may be like, okay, cool. How do I even start the sentence? So one of the things that, and I gotta say this, like, don't do this, but do this. This is the one I struggle with the most. So this is the situation where a kid is kind of like trying to predict how they're doing on an assignment. My knee jerk is always to say, hey, what do you think? You're gonna get an A on this? Do you have a good feeling about it?
Yeah.
And I constantly in my head, I'm telling myself, do not ask for a vibe check, Rachel. Ask for a rubric check. So every one of our students, they have these things that are coming from their teachers, a rubric of how you get an A. So instead of saying like, hey, how do you feel about it? Like, you know what? Get that, share your screen. Let's look at that rubric together. Let's find the grade that you want to get. Let's look at what you're going to be asked to do. So Jen, like in your sessions, how are you using the things that the kids are getting in school to help them with these self-regulation tasks?
So another great question, because especially with elementary and middle school, students want to jump right into their assignment, right?
Yeah,
Which I'm happy about. I like that. But they jump in and they do the things that they like to do the most. So, for example, I have a student that needed to put together a science poster on Canva. So he had these great pictures on there, and he had things on there, but I felt like there might be some things that may have needed to be on that poster. And so I said, okay, well, that I love the way this is looking. Let's go and make sure that we have everything that we need on this poster. And
hmm,
so he's like, oh, I'm absolutely sure. I said, oh, let's just go check the teacher's requirements. And so there was a couple of vocabulary words, definitions that needed to be included. And then just like you mentioned, the rubric, the teacher had put the rubric out there and what would get the student, all fives. And
yeah,
so when he was looking through that, and then we took it and we compared it to the assignment. And so then he got the grade that he was looking for because he was able to follow the rubric and
yeah,
get what he was looking at. But it is something that has to be taught and remind the students to
mm,
do it. I even tell the students, as teachers, certifications that we take, I'm taking classes, college classes for my teacher certification. I have to do the same thing. And so
yeah.
I will do an assignment and think, oh, I bet there's a rubric out there. And so I do the same thing. And so I'm going back so that I can, make sure that I'm getting the grade that I want. So I'm also trying to remind them that this is not something you're just doing in elementary or middle
Right.
school. This is something you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Even in jobs,
Mhm.
you want to know what your boss wants you to do, right?
Actually something that you just said there just occurred to me, like this would be a great way because like we as educators, I do that too. Like through the state of Pennsylvania, I have like continuing ed hours for like to keep my certification like up to date. But
Right.
I also know that so many of us, like we have projects that we're working on, and the assignment isn't coming like in a worksheet on Google Classroom, but it's coming in an email. That could be a great way too. Like if you want to have that kind of conversation with your favorite learner at home, you could show them that real world application. Like, look, I know you're not going to get what I'm doing here, but here's the ask from my team. And now look at all the things that I have to do. I made myself a checklist. Now I'm making sure that I'm doing all the tasks that I need to do. This type of thing, this is how you coach and teach these self-regulation strategies. And it's a great way to start the conversation. Like I remind myself all the time, do not do the vibe check. Do the rubric check. Use
Right.
those tools that students are getting in school. So right before we get to question and answer, I do want to preview tomorrow's session. So day 3 of Fall Into Focus is focusing on unlocking focus, supporting girls with ADHD in school and beyond. So if you have a student that is dealing with ADHD, we are going to be sharing universal strategies, but we are also going to be talking about things that are very specific to your favorite young lady who is dealing with ADHD and has challenges. And these strategies are very, very helpful regardless of a student's age. So we hope to see you there. Now, I've noticed some questions in the chat about our sessions because Jan and I have been giving you great examples. So we offer executive function coaching at Educational Connections, and we have a 4-step approach. I do want to tell everybody a little bit about Lesson Space because Jan has given us great examples. Lesson Space is a web-based video conferencing software. I like to describe it as if a smartboard in the classroom and Zoom had a baby. And it is education focused. So that means that when students are working with us in Lesson Space, they do not have to use the same area that everybody else uses. Every lesson space, I like to say that it's a locked room. Every student has their own room. We can save work in there. We can track progress in there, and your child's lesson space is not going to be seen or used by any other child. It is a great way to provide that one-on-one support. And Jan, you were already in like some of your examples telling us about our 4-step approach for executive function coaching. Would you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, we check in with each other, what's been going on in school, just let me know, maybe if they've had projects or the things that they're working with. Then we go and we, start with the grades and we check in and see where they are with grades. If the teachers have put anything in there that we need to be aware of. A lot of students will notice, oh, my teacher, didn't put that grade in and I actually have it back. So they need to go and show their teacher, or we'll send an email just to remind the teacher that they had the assignment back. So it just keeps them where they feel like they're in control of what's going on in their grades.
Absolutely.
So we do that first. Now, as we go through this probably takes about, I'm saying between 5 and 10 minutes. But usually after we have several sessions, it only takes a few minutes for us to go through these steps, and then we spend most of our time working on assignments,
Mm-hmm.
planning out what they're going to do after the sessions, setting up, calendars and ways to break assignments down. But we do go through the grades first, then we go to the teachers' pages. We want to make sure that we're looking at what the teachers have posted with the class assignments, make sure there's, if there's any questions that the student may have had. We're looking at upcoming tests. We're looking at study guides. Then we're also talking about how their week's going to play out, and if there's anything that can get in the way of preparing for a test, how are we going to work around that? And
Mm-hmm.
then what we're going to do is we're going to start working on assignments together. So what are you having the most trouble with? So if a student says, like you had mentioned, writing,
Yeah.
I just don't know how to start my essay. I have a student and she will put off doing just the brainstorming piece of it because she feels so uncomfortable about it. And so she's like, I just don't know how to brainstorm this story that I need to write. And so that's what we start with first. And then
Mm-hmm.
as I'm going through it, I'm trying to give her some suggestions and some strategies so that if she has this assignment on her own, how is she going to brainstorm on her own? How is she going to
Right.
start that? And so for them to let me know, okay, I'm having the most trouble with these assignments, so that I can help guide her so that she can do it on her own between our sessions. And so
Mm-hmm.
then after we go through that, then we're going through and they're doing the work. And so they're usually presenting it. They can share their screen. And so that we can go through some of those assignments together. And then for my math students, we're doing the same thing, going through
Mm-hmm.
the same process and just, doing it with math. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that, I mean, Oh, and we had another question that just came in, so I'm actually going to kind of like answer that and also like, talk about what we do with our coaching. So we had a question about like executive functioning regarding like home and personal things. So I
Mhm.
will say that we're focusing on academics, but when we have things that are organized and planned out in one area, those skills transfer. So, this isn't like, I wish that we could be like, oh, okay, put a camera on the kid's room and let's clean the kid's room. But if we can like clean up the backpack, if we can get a routine for doing homework, those are transferable skills. And I do have students I've been working with for several years where I was just working with one the other night that she was like, that thing that we did with the timed work, I actually did that and I cleaned out my closet. Like, hey, good on you. So, I mean, I think it's like when students really are valuing things, they are using them in different portions of their life. Now, Jan and I have given folks a lot of information about how our sessions work. You may be interested in this type of thing. I would say scan our QR code, click the link in the chat, and get an appointment set up with one of our program managers here because they are going to be able to answer all of your questions and give you that personalized um, feedback that you want. So we have a ton of questions and I mean anybody at this point that maybe you want to like cut down, the time that you're spending in this webinar. We are going to do Q&A. We would love to have people stick around. And I don't know about you, Jan, but I mean, I'm just willing to answer as many questions as we can right now. So
Sure.
we've had a cluster of them that
Okay.
are we had a couple folks that say like, oh, I'm in the same boat with this person, I'm in the same boat with this person. So we have some questions about students that are dealing with ADHD and that are also high functioning autism spectrum, talking about issues with a student being like emotional, defiant about work, unable
Mhm.
to keep things organized. So the first thing I do want to say is we work with students with all different types of learning needs and exceptionalities. I have students on my roster who are on the autism who are on the spectrum. I have
Mhm.
students that are dealing with ADHD. This is what we do. And it's
Mhm.
all personalized and it's all
Mhm.
tailored to the kid. But Jan, when you're thinking about like helping a student that has these exceptionalities, that is dealing with emotions about work and like defiancy with work, like what are some strategies that you use?
So I have a student I'm working with this situation, and so what I've been working doing with him is I need to break these assignments and these things that we're doing into little small segments. And
Hmm.
depending on what the subject is, I am using some of the things that he enjoys to connect it to what we're working on. So he doesn't enjoy reading. He doesn't enjoy the reading assignment. So we are picking, we're doing some of the reading assignments, but we're also connecting it to some of the reading that he does enjoy. So how does this apply to the stories that you do like? And so
Right.
trying to talk about inferring and talking about some of how are the main characters connecting in this story. So those are some of the ways that we are doing that assignment, but we're also connecting it with some of his high interests also.
Hmm.
And so we're starting off with very small amounts of time and then building and building. And as I'm doing that, I'm building that relationship with him, and he's getting more and more interested in certain things. But sometimes it takes different strategies for different subjects. And the pushback might happen more with one subject versus another subject.
Yeah.
But I'm always trying new strategies with that particular student. So,
Mhm.
but the strategy that's worked the most with students for that one question was breaking it into like, okay, I'm going to work with the student for about 5 minutes. I'm going to
Mhm.
connect with some things that are similar that he likes and see
Yeah.
if I can push forward with that assignment. But I don't push too much. And then maybe the next time I'm going to, add a little bit more to it. But that's usually how I approach it at the beginning.
Yeah. I have a student I've been working with for a number of years who deals with ADHD and is on the spectrum and is now in college. We started working together when she was in high school. And that thing of the emotional response and then the defiance, that was really a pattern that I saw. One of the things that I do is I will talk with students about, okay, can we think about this not in terms of you, but in terms of another person? Because what I notice in the defiance with this particular student is she'll say, well, I understand. I don't know why I have to do that. And so sometimes to get the work done, I'll say to her, okay, can we think about it as a student who isn't you, who might need to learn these things? What if we wrote it for that student who, because you're very gifted, you do know this stuff, but your professor here wants to see evidence that you can write about it, wants to see your thinking. You know, that's what homework is, or that's what this paper is. That's been something that's really helped because this student and we talk a lot about like how stuff will feel a little bit personal when it maybe isn't. And
Mhm.
I see that a lot with kids that are, you know, that are a little bit defiant or that are on the spectrum or that are dealing with ADHD. That's something that does work for me.
Yeah.
I have a question in the chat that as teachers, I get this all the time. So somebody says, when I sit down to help my daughter with homework, she tries to get me to tell her the answer or very directly guide her to it. How do we help with homework without being pushed towards doing the thinking for them? First of all, if I had $1 for every time a kid has wanted me to give them the answer, I would
Yeah.
be a very rich lady.
Yes. Yes.
So, does that happen to you, Jan?
All the time. I
Yeah.
mean, all the time. So, uh, would you like to share? Would you like me to?
I want you to say what you do. I really do. I
Okay.
want to learn some
So,
strategies from you,
so
Jan.
I will, so if, unless it's math, math is a totally different topic, but for other subjects, say science, social studies, I just say, that's a great question. I need to research that too. How are
Yeah.
we going to do that? Let's look at your book. Let's look at your textbook because I need to go through that and look
Mm-hmm.
at it. And or, I'll say, I recall something about that when I was in school too. So I need to look through that. How am I going to do that? What do you have? What can we use? And so I'm usually doing it that way so that I'm not just telling them, okay, this, protons, neutrons, electrons. And so I'm not
Right.
just going through and telling them the answer. So it is difficult though. It's difficult because you feel like you want to give them the answers, but it's, difficult for them to do it on their own, for another question. So that's usually how I do it for other topics.
Yeah.
Now, for math, I will show them the example that's given. And so I'll say, okay, well, let's go through this. Let's model. I'm going to show you this model and we're going to go through this and show
Mm-hmm.
them where the model is
Yeah.
so they can do it on their own the next time. So that's how I usually attack that type of situation.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm working with older kids, so I tend to use a little bit of humor,
Uh-huh.
but I'm also a little bit blunt, where I'll say something like, "Babe, I have already passed the 10th grade. It's your turn." Okay.
Uh-huh.
Also with my college students, because my background is in writing instruction and I taught at the university level. No one I work with can think of a thesis. What would you write for a thesis of this paper?
Yes.
And so I again will use a little bit of humor, like, okay, I'll tell you what, start writing it down, and then I can write a thesis with a bunch of words in it, like, oh, well, what does facetious mean? Well, better write your own thesis. So I think that there, whatever your kind of vibe is as a person, there are
Mhm.
ways that you can deflect it. So the first thing is you kind of have to let the kid know, like, look, I know what you're trying to do here. Great attempt. I love you with all my heart, but you got to do your own work. And then, like Jan said, there are ways to give them inroads into that so that they are doing it themselves. But it's hard I mean, there are times where, you're struggling with a kid and a thought will cross your mind like, I could, you know what? I could just give this kid a thesis. We could move on to the next thing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But in that struggle comes learning. So there are times where things are, you can be a little bit uncomfortable and learn and get your homework done. Another thing is to recognize the fact that, like, all of that procrastination of asking a person to do the work for you, you could probably go through the book and find this stuff yourself, in about the same time it would take for me to say something brilliant to you. So I'm looking at the time here. I mean, I'm willing to spend another 10 minutes, Jan, if you would want to do some more questions. I
Sure.
don't, yeah, okay. So I'm going to look through here. Okay. So we actually had one that was kind of piggybacking on the content from yesterday. Yesterday's webinar was about procrastination. And so we have a participant who said, you talked about a student who's like defiant in their procrastination, meaning that they are going to procrastinate and then get mad if you bug them about it. And this participant said, this defines my daughter's attitude to motivation and procrastination. Any ways to try to get through to her that she needs help? Okay, so this is one where self-efficacy is going to be key. If you can get her to tap into a time when she felt confident about her work and she was getting things done, because in order, like, you have to change the thinking before you can start to change the outcome. So right now she's like defiant and digging her heels in, like, I don't need this. I can do this. She may actually be thinking about a time in the past where she was able to do it. But you could also get her to recognize that things have changed. So, for example, I was working with a student for a number of years who was very defiant about planning help. And he told me, when I was in middle school, I didn't need to meet with anybody. I didn't need to have these sessions. I could just do the work myself. Okay, you're telling me about your self-efficacy. You're telling me about your past self and when things were working. So then I asked some follow-up questions. Are things exactly the same in middle school as they are now? Are there things that are more difficult from middle school than they are now? So I was using what the student was communicating with me to gradually get him to see like different possibilities, different outcomes. Is this something that happened instantaneously? Oh my goodness, no. This was, we were working through the cycle of change. But over time, in this, like the second semester that we were working together, he came into our first session of the new year and he said, he said, over Christmas break, I was really thinking about how, in middle school, I wasn't assigned reading over my break, and things are really different now than they used to be. So, through that conversation, that was in his head. And that cooked for a while. And then out came a new way of thinking about things. Have you ever had like a time like that, Jen, where you've had a defiant student and you've been able to tap into past thinking to help them change their thinking?
So I do have a student that is similar, and what we had to start doing is using an assignment that he
Mhm.
had worked on, and how long did it take you to complete that assignment? So we do a lot of time management skills. And so we had been timing. And so I said, okay, well, let's look back and see how long did it take you? Oh, it took me 10 minutes to get that assignment done. Okay, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so he's like, oh, yeah, it only took me 10 minutes. And so I think the first block was that, oh my goodness, this is going to take me hours to do. And so we
Hmm.
are able to go back over time management and say, well, it only took you about 10 minutes. So how
Yeah.
about we set the timer and let's spend 10 minutes doing it? Okay, because that's what you did. And if we don't get it done in 10 minutes, that's okay. We can set another time to complete it. But let's just go ahead and spend the 10 minutes. And
Yeah.
so I can usually get them to go past it in that way, saying, looking at past, how long did it take you? And then understanding that it's going to be a short period of time, or just
Hmm.
setting a timer for a short period of time and getting started with it. That's a strategy that's worked for me when I have kids that are just procrastinating and just being, defiant over it, just do not want to do it. And that's what we've tried, and it gets a lot of the kids over that little hump of not wanting to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too that there we have some questions about like I'm gonna try to like get a lot of our thoughts in. I think this is probably gonna be like our last question. So I'm gonna try to like talk about some trends. So we have a question like I have a high school junior who is dealing with procrastination for homework. There's a couple questions in here about things with procrastination of homework, using a planner, homework that is not what's the word I'm looking for? Mandatory, but that is optional. So I think that I'm seeing trends in questions here. How can we get a student to engage with things that are helpful, that we know are going to improve their performance, their grade, all this other stuff, but they see it as optional? That's a
Mhm.
trend I'm seeing in questions about homework planners, all that stuff. So we know it is really going to help, but the
Yeah.
kid sees it as optional. What can we do?
Yes. So, would you like me to answer?
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to
Okay.
hear you, Jan.
Okay. So, I have that happen. That's happening a lot more. I'm seeing optional assignments from teachers a lot more this school year than I have ever seen before.
Yeah.
And so those optional assignments tend to be study guides.
Mm-hmm.
So, and with the students that I'm working with, those study guides are extremely important. And so
Yeah.
we are looking at, I said, so what I've had to do is say, okay, let's just look at the study guide. Let's look at this optional assignment. We look at
Mhm.
it and I say, that looks very similar to your homework assignments. Those questions, I bet those are what your questions are going to look like on the test. And
Yeah.
that's why your teacher has put optional. Okay,
Hmm.
so students that do this are going to have a little bit of extra help before they take their test.
Right.
Now, I am not going to say kids are going to jump right into wanting to do it. That's
No.
definitely not the case. But
Mm-mm.
it is something that I do have to talk to them about because I agree, it is very difficult. And a lot of the kids I'm working with, they have so many other things that they're doing, activities. So that doesn't even make the priority list because it's optional. Okay, so I am having to train them to look at the optional assignment as it's your study guide to prepare
Yeah.
for a test. And so instead of you having to come up with the practice problems on your own, we're going to use this optional assignment.
Exactly.
That's less work for you, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm having to do. But this is something I'm having to train myself because it is difficult to get them to do those assignments. So the
Yeah.
parent that asked that question, great question. It's
Yeah.
definitely something that we're seeing also.
Yeah, we have, I mean, there's a lot of them. And one too is like, okay, so my student is not like reviewing, but is cramming,
Mm.
and I gotta say, working with teenagers and college students, I can wheel and deal now. One of the strategies that I use is I ask them if they're willing to try it the once, and I tell them, look, if you try it once and it is as wretched as you think it is, we will think up something else. Now, in my back pocket, I have the notion that it's going to work. I can generally get them to try it once. Like, hey, I know that cramming, I know that not doing this optional stuff is the way you want to do it, but you're also worried about your grades. Would you be willing to do this with me one time? And
Mhm,
we could see, is there any change in the grade? Is there any movement?
mhm.
We can also see, are you feeling less stressed? Are you feeling less tired? And then we can use that positive experience to try to get more of those in the future. I am like kind of overwhelmed by how amazing these questions are. I wish that we had more time, but we are going to say a fond farewell now to everybody that has joined us today. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to seeing folks perhaps for day 3. We're going to be talking about girls and ADHD. So hope to see you and thank you for being here today.
Bye-bye.
Bye.